live from the city. This is the High Valuation Code with Matteo Turi.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 8 of the High Valuation Code Live. Welcome, Matteo. Each week, we explore how businesses move from fundability to valuation. And so from the valuation to scale and from scale to exit. So it's a whole process that we are covering these 13 weeks. And today we begin with group number 3 of the whole framework. And group number 3 involves the scaling, capital, and resilience of the organizations. So the first two group, if you remember, or you can check on our profiles, focus on fundability, governance, trust, and the internal architecture investors need to see before they commit to capital. But now we move into something even more dangerous, if you may, because many businesses do not fail because they stop growing. They fail because they grow in the wrong way, which is even worse. And that is what today is about, growth that destroys the value. Believe it or not, this is happening every day because not all growth is healthy and not all capital is helpful and not all scales increases valuation. So Matteo, again, welcome back. How are you doing?
Thank you so much, Francisco. And what you mentioned here, it's one of the most dangerous illusions in business. And I've been thinking about this in my experience every day. Founders, they often assume that if revenue is increasing, value must be increasing too. But we discover this every day. It's simply not true. Some businesses they grow revenues while, for example, they're weakening margins. Yeah.
Right.
Some do grow the customers while increasing the complexity of how they deliver to the customer. So again, destroying value. Some they raise capital while destroying ownership. They destroy control. And with that, let's face it, they also destroy future negotiating power. So on its own, just growth is not really a proof of strength.
Right.
Sometimes growth is just fragility moving faster, really.
Right. So I have your book, by the way, Fail, Pivot, and Scale, that you can get in Amazon. And one of the things actually, I bookmarked this for today on chapter 2, the scale-ups stage from growth to maturity. And I think that this is relevant today because one section here I really like is this phrase that says, the scale-up stage is about providing worlds when everything speeds up, right? So what that means, and I think that we need so. I think actually when the things speed up and the growth is when the things start to get if you don't have a solid foundation, then you start to
Yeah.
see all the problems. So when you say that you mentioned growth destroy value, that phrase remind me of that. What does that actually look like in practice?
To say this reminds me of the one of the one of the picture everyone can relate to is like the Titanic, which feels is unsinkable.
Right,
You accelerate, you ignore all the risks.
right,
There's an iceberg in front of you, and because you're going too fast, guess what happens? You sink, and
yeah,
that's an issue. Yeah, I always say growth without structure is velocity towards risk. It's
right,
important. Now, distraction and growth usually shows in three main ways. Yeah.
right,
The first, the company grows before the operating model is ready. Okay.
right,
That's the first one. It happens really every day, and it's actually so common that it's difficult to it's difficult to miss it. Really, it happens all the
right,
time. The second, he raises capital without understanding the long-term consequences. Yeah.
right,
And that's because, everyone thinks, okay, I need to raise capital. Wherever I get there, I will accept it, and then we'll think about this later.
right,
Number three, there's confusion between activity and what I would call it instead. I would call it scalable value creation. Okay.
right,
So what happens? The business gets bigger but it doesn't get stronger
right,
at all. Revenue rises, but the system underneath becomes more chaotic, more difficult to manage. Yeah.
yeah,
Um, we see the head count is rising, but really, there's something else that's falling, which is clarity. So there's less and less ownership as well. We tend to see this execution gap, these ownership gaps coming up all over the places. Really,
right,
capital comes in, but control starts disappearing. Yeah,
right, right.
and that's what I call destructive growth. Yeah.
Right. So this is what, well, you mentioned a few things actually. It reminds me many times when companies say, "Oh, we are through these growing pains," but actually, these growing pains usually why they say that it's so funny because actually what they plan this month, the following week change, and the following change, and then they plan again the next month. All the time, even if they have the capital, all things seems to be evolving nowhere really. And this I think is when they start to dilute all the efforts because they don't have really something that actually can. That's when you mentioned actually the underneath foundation is not as solid as they should be even when they have the capital. So in this dilution, why what is the things that the founders get wrong?
Yeah, let's talk about dilution on capital stack engineering.
Right. All right. Yeah.
I want to talk about that because usually what happens is founders they tend to raise capital without the help of financial intelligence. So they say, I
Right.
must raise capital. Okay, let me see what I'm able to get. So there's no selectivity because in the early stage, capital feels like survival. I need the money because I need to pass that stage. Otherwise,
Right.
I won't be able to survive. Yeah. But when capital feels like survival, founders often focus on just getting the deal done without understanding the consequences, what will come later. Now, they do not focus enough on what the deal will do in the future. Yeah.
Right.
So,
Right.
but every round sets a precedent. When you decide to raise capital, every percentage given away changes the future leverage.
Right.
And whenever a deal is rushed, it will make the next round harder, not easier. Obviously, this is quite it's intuitive, it's easy to understand. So
Right.
dilution is not just about losing shares, because dilution is actually about losing what I call a strategic room, yeah?
All right. Yeah.
So you put yourself into a situation where you don't have optionality. And what happens with that? It's about weakening the future negotiating power. Because you've accepted that deal, now the future deal, they need to conform to the earlier deal, yeah?
Right.
So this why I was talking about strategic room. And
Right. Right.
and it's really about reaching later stages with less control than expected. And in actual fact, it makes your company less attractive to an investor that comes later.
Right.
Um, so what happens here is the founder can build a bigger business and still own a much weaker position inside that bigger business. That's the consequence really of not
Right.
planning with financial intelligence. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that term, financial intelligence, because I think it's quite a very, very appropriate for businesses, because finances is not just a modeling in spreadsheet and just throw it to the market. It's about how, and I think that you hit it there very, very well. So it's what is coming next, what is the next round or the next instrument that the company will need, and probably what today looks like a helpful capital is actually expensive capital in the future, because actually you're not creating a foundation of for the future. You're pretty much creating a bigger hurdle, if you may. That's right.
Yeah, this happens because finance always comes too late, unfortunately.
Right. Right.
Um, the wrong capital often looks attractive in the short term.
Right.
Why does it happen? Because people are driven by pressure, today's pressure, okay?
Right.
So I need to remove today's pressure. Uh, then it looks attractive also because it extends the runway. Because founders tend to feel this as a really a fear situation.
Right. Right.
How can I extend, the
Yeah.
duration of the business? Um, Now, this also creates momentum. The capital creates momentum. But later, after it created momentum, it creates what I call a structural damage,
Right.
because not all capital behaves the same way. Some capital supports the company's trajectory.
Right.
Some capital actually creates some distortion, yeah. Some investor will align with the pace and logic of the business.
Right.
They will ask the right question at the right time. Other investor, they actually create pressure for decision that the business might not be ready to execute, yeah,
Right. Right.
because they're not really aligned, so they're not patient enough to understand what is the right thing to do at that particular stage. That
Right.
happens more frequently than many people think about. I was actually speaking to quite a few angel investors lately, and I found that this was a common trait, I would say.
Right.
Um, Now, once the pressure entered the system, the company can start optimizing for fundraising. But what happens is, you fundraise, but without value creation. So
Right.
you are actually not really executing the reason why you're fundraising. So you should
Right.
be raising funds so that you can create value, but instead, because you just concentrate on fundraising, you're not creating value. So this is when growth becomes really, I would call it theatrical, like a theater,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than structural. It looks like
Right.
real growth, but it isn't, because it's just a representation that doesn't really stick to what is really happening. It's not without structure. You're not really creating real growth.
Right. Right. And that's very interesting because you mentioned financial intelligence, and then you mentioned the capital chaos too. So in that particular issue, what do you mean with the capital chaos?
Capital chaos, yeah. I mean, this is one of the situation where I always insist that you do not improvise in finance. You
Right,
design. You design. This word is not used frequently enough as it should be, even between finance professional.
right,
Capital stack chaos happens when funding is added without design. So you have to design how you create your offer capital.
right,
Now,
right.
a bit of equity here, a convertible instrument there, a loan that seemed manageable at that time. Let's also add some grant expectation, some deferred liabilities, some founder cash,
Yeah,
sometimes a director loan. Now, it's a mess. Individually, each piece
right,
may seem reasonable, but together they create confusion. And
right, right.
investors who come later, then they hate confusion. I've had so many situations where they said, "Oh, well, it's too complicated, and I don't
Yeah,
want to start the conversation." Because if the capital stack is unclear, then risk is unclear. And as usual, risk really determines valuation. High risk, low valuation; low risk,
right.
high valuation. When the risk is unclear, valuation will suffer. The capital stack should be engineered, should be designed, yeah.
Yeah,
Should support the business model, the growth path, the next stage of investor confidence. Um, if it becomes messy, it just stops supporting scale and really starts undermining it. That's where, unfortunately, many people they create damage without really knowing they're creating damage. Yeah.
right, right. I think it's quite fascinating what you mentioned because many, not many times, actually, as far as I remember, not many companies look as a capital as a valuation creation purposely. So they say, oh, we need to do this because we need capital. For example, you and I receive all the time this. We are raising 3 million, we're raising 5 million, but actually there is no clear understanding where the value or the valuation of the company is going to be, or this raise is going to contribute. It's kind of implied, but not explicitly mentioned. And sometimes that is quite interesting what you mentioned when this disorder in terms of this, I wouldn't say disorder, but actually I would say when it's not clear where the capital stack affects the valuation so much, why that happen, how it affects the valuation so much that people perhaps not fully embedding that in the capital raise or the capital stack.
Yeah, I would also start by saying this, why this happens all the time. It happens all the
Right,
time because finance is always late in the game, yeah?
right, right.
So the founder will always say, I need to raise capital and say, oh, finance not now because it's expensive or it's going to control what I do.
Yeah,
It's a big mistake. Really, capital stack engineering, capital design requires financial intelligence to be early in the game. And why eventually the founder loses? Because valuation is not just about performance, not at all.
right,
It's about confidence. That's why. I mean, it happens so many times. Yeah, I speak with an investor, say, "Well, I'm raising capital now. I've actually completed the investor agreement, but I am really making it compulsory for the founders to recruit a CFO because that's what
right,
gives
right,
confidence. An investor wants to see who sits where. Who
right,
gets
right.
paid first. Yeah." You may have a design where someone gets paid earlier than someone else. Like say, for
Right, right,
example, a loan gets paid before equity. What obligations already exist? They want to know, okay, what's going on here? Yeah. Is there already a loan which makes my equity less valuable?
right,
What rights have already been granted? because
Right.
there could be a covenant that needs to be read
Yeah.
properly by a lawyer. What future rounds may be constrained. So going back to confidence, yeah, if that picture is unclear, they don't just see complexity, they see future negotiation risk.
Right.
Um, I would say in a few words, they see legal friction, they see misalignment. Uh, what they see is the possibility that capital is actually being called now so that it can be used to clean up yesterday's
Right.
decision instead of accelerating the opportunities for the future, for tomorrow.
Right. Right.
I would say this is why messy structures reduce excitement very, very quickly.
Right. Excitement from the investment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and back to the one thing that you mentioned earlier, actually, that we I think that's very important because actually the back to the excitement in terms of raising capital and the messy structures that actually later creates a bigger problem based on let's say a loose in good not in a bad way, but actually in a loose capital raise today, and it seems it makes sense, but actually create a future problem. And then you say, "Oh, we have a funding gap again." And actually, why is that a recurring problem that forces companies again back to more rounds when the first rounds have been allegedly the good ones? Because you say, "Oh, we have a funding gap again. What are we going to do?" So well, let's go do another round. Why is that such a recurring problem? Like if the
Yeah, I would say it's I would say this is down to belief. Yeah. I mean, many businesses raise for the version of the plan they want to believe. Yeah.
all right, yeah,
Uh, not for the version of the journey they're actually about to live, So it's
right,
just,
right,
they think, this is what I'm living on. That does not. So what I do is they underestimate the timing.
right,
They underestimate so many things. They underestimate working capital, customer acquisition friction, hiring delays. To find talent is not as
right,
easy as they thought it was going to be. They underestimate execution drag. So what happens? The company raises enough money to move, but not enough money to arrive. Yeah. So you
right,
start
right,
in a journey you cannot finish. Yeah. And that gap is where the value gets really damaged, yeah, because the assumption were too optimistic, or there was not really any assumption about what if something goes wrong, what if something breaks, what if there's a delay. Because once a company is forced into emergency fundraising,
yeah,
negotiating power collapses. The business is no longer raising from strength, really. Now
right,
raising from pressure.
yeah,
An investor can feel that immediately, and obviously the negotiation power goes away.
right. And do you have a typical case story that shows all these dynamics in play?
Okay, let me think about a practical case.
Yeah,
Let's imagine a company that raises capital based on on a plan, let's say 18 months, which is
right,
typical, yeah. Let's say the model assumes very strong customer conversion, uh, controlled hiring, no serious delay in implementation. So it's quite
right,
optimistic.
right,
On paper, the runway looks fine. How much money do we need? Okay, this is how much money we need, and there seems to be enough really contingency that. But in reality, sales cycles will stretch.
right,
Hiring takes longer. Gross margin takes time to stabilize. It's not
right,
as quick as people thought. A few customer decisions slip by a quarter. Okay, very, very, very common. And in 18 months, it makes a big difference.
right, right,
Um, the company still grows. Okay, but cash moves faster than expected.
Right.
Fast means, the runway gets depleted much
Yeah.
faster. And 6 or 7 months before the next milestone, the management realizes the runway is no longer enough. So that's the funding gap. Now the company has to raise money earlier than planned, so there's more pressure. Uh, and guess what happened? It now happens usually with weaker numbers.
Right. Right.
Uh,
All
Not
right. Yeah.
only weaker numbers, more urgency, that translates into worse terms. So
Yeah.
the issue was not that the company had no potential. The company had potential, did a good 18-month plan. The issue was that the capital plan was not engineered for reality. There was
Right.
optimism, there wasn't enough contingency, and that's what
Yeah.
happened, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. I like what you mentioned earlier, that the company structure their capital raising based on what they believe rather than in a financial intelligence, like you mentioned, like in a structure that actually creates value to the future. So if we go into the other side of the equation, what does a healthy growth look like instead? Right? We see all the negatives, so we can look more in the bit of the positive ones.
Yeah, we need to move into discipline. Yeah.
Right, right.
Healthy growth is discipline growth. I mean, I've been myself in a situation where I have to delay hiring decision. First, I
Yeah,
wanted to show to the board of directors that the sales were moving in the right direction
right,
before doing hiring. So it's growth where revenue, operation, governance, and capital all move in alignment. Yeah.
right,
So, yeah, you don't just because you committed on your budget, you're gonna hire somebody. It doesn't mean you have to hire them exactly at that time if the revenues are delaying. Uh,
right.
it is growth where the company doesn't just ask, "Can we grow?" It asks, "Can we absorb growth without breaking the core?" Yeah.
Mhm. Right,
Typical questions that need to be really answered are, can the margins survive? Uh, can service quality survive? Uh, can leadership survive? It's about survival,
right.
really.
Yeah,
Can the balance sheet also survive? Yeah. Because next time you don't want to present yourself a balance sheet that is depleted by what's happening now.
right, right,
Can the capital structure support the next phase? Because you have to think ahead. You can't just say behind the curve, really. So that's the real test. The goal is not speed at any cost. The goal is scalable growth without structural damage.
right. And I, it's interesting that actually one figure always is revolving around this, which is the CFO. So the structure, the value creation, the I mentioned structure, value creation, the capital intelligence or the finance intelligence. So from the CFO lenses, because actually sometimes it's just this is the people that is financing, but actually from the CFO lenses, like a figure in the organization central to all these things. So where does the CFO sit in these conversations, really? So, I mean, actually, in the structure organization, when you go into this conversation, where the CFO sits?
Yeah, I've been speaking, I think, so many times about the finance profession need to change,
Right,
in such an era, because, as I said, especially with intangible value dominating valuation. So the CFO should sit really right at the center of it. In actual fact, investors sometimes they make it mandatory for a business to have a CFO when there is capital. Why
right,
not? Because the CFO should be the one asking the hard questions before the damage appears.
right.
What questions does the CFO ask?
Yeah,
Uh, what does this round do to the ownership? Say if we go ahead with this capital raise, what happens to the ownership of the business? What does this debt do to flexibility? Yeah, say you sign for a covenant. Now you're losing flexibility. Um, other question is, what assumptions are too optimistic? Because that's the hard question you really have to ask, you know. What's the real runway? Uh,
Right.
how much money really is gonna be sufficient, is gonna be left? What happens if revenue arrives on 1 quarter late?
Well,
What
yeah,
happens if
yeah.
hiring cost more than expected? You know, if thought they were going to
Right.
spend 150,000, you spend it 200,000, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
That needs to be really um, asked. Then what happens if the next round takes longer than planned? Again,
Right.
that's another risk, you know, because, you know, usually things take a bit longer. So this is the difference between reporting growth and engineering growth, yeah?
Right. Right.
So the CFO should really be designing rather than the just reporting. Yeah.
Right.
So a strong CFO does not just measure momentum performance with whatever numbers come out of the financial statements. A strong CFO protects value while the momentum is building.
Right, right. Excellent. Yeah, and I like this thing that you mentioned as reporting growth and engineer growth because actually we have to mention this because it's the technology how it evolves today, how AI affect or s- get into these kind of conversations.
Well, AI really is a game changer because it affects valuation. It affects really so many things, you know.
Yeah,
And right now, if you're not AI ready, if you're not professionalized to be skilled by AI, you might actually miss out completely on investors because they will just ignore you. So,
right.
which is a big, big subject, you know. Now,
Yeah,
AI makes this even more important because AI can accelerate activity very, very quickly.
right, right.
What can AI accelerate? Well, product development, communication, customer interaction, internal workflows, obviously all this logically, yeah. But
Yeah,
obviously, before you do that, you need to be professionalized.
right, right,
Acceleration without structure is clearly dangerous, yeah,
right.
because AI is actually amplifying. And if the model is weak,
Yeah,
AI will actually scale weakness. So it will take you into the opposite direction. If the pricing is weak, AI scales weak economics, yeah,
right.
you will go even faster in the wrong direction. So that's unfortunately the problem.
Yeah,
If the governance is weak, AI will speed up bad decisions. Yeah.
right.
Because already we will scale whatever is there. So you need to be
Yeah,
strong in the first place. So once again, the issue is not whether the company is using AI. The issue is whether the business has been designed to scale intelligently,
right.
because AI is an accelerator, uh,
Yeah,
but is an accelerator in positive and negative direction.
right.
So that's important, you know. First, you need
Yeah,
to get professionalized.
yeah,
AI does not replace architecture.
right, right. It's like a tool. So it's not you can use a hammer to build a house, or you can use a hammer to do something bad, if you may.
Yeah, but if the house is designed poorly, it will
Yeah,
accelerate. So it will
yeah,
make the house
exactly.
even worse, you know. Let's call it
It will
like
put the right nail in the wrong structure, so it would be a disaster at the end. So how we can help companies to avoid this situation? So to look into the capital stack, how to avoid these gaps, how to design or the architecture of finance in terms of with the finance intelligence, etc. So this is something that there is a sprint. It's a high valuation sprint that actually help companies to understand this step by step. Because actually, one thing is consuming information. The other thing is put in the right sequence to produce results. Right?
absolutely. And this is where we created this 12 outcomes in 49 days. Those 12 outcomes are designed for your business to become absolutely fundable with high valuation. That's why it's
Right.
called the high valuation code. Now,
Right.
the 12 outcomes are the ones that we've announced in the previous week as well, but let me remind them there are four groups. The first
Yeah.
group is about fundability, passing the filter from investor, ensuring that capital doesn't say no, capital
Right.
say yes, having the right intellectual property monetization structure, the right revenue architecture, of course, yeah. Then group two is about really leadership depth, following the high valuation triangle, really removing the founder dependency detox, we call it like that, having a top class leadership and governance that really supports the business, having the right narrative for investors so that you can actually attract capital and not really chase capital. Capital will chase you. Then the third group is where we started today as well. Is all about scale in the right manner. Capital stack engineering is obviously one part of this, but then it's all about how you scale with discipline. So we got the other outcomes there, and then the final group is about how to exit properly. And the exit is not part of just when you exit; it's also when you start. Because if you don't plan your exit when you start, your business will be much weaker than the competitors. It will not attract capital. It
Yeah.
will not attract the right, or you will not, I would say, be accelerated in the right manner by artificial
Right.
intelligence as well. So that's why you
Yeah.
need an exit plan as well. And
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
also a part about really how to structure the deal eventually. So
Yeah.
very useful for finance professional. If you want to get to the next stage to become a top class CFO, or a top class finance professional, or you just are a founder and entrepreneur who wants to scale your business in the right way with the high valuation strategy as well. So if you're interested, I do recommend you write Sprint on the comment, or you
Right.
write a direct message to me and Francisco, or me or Francisco, and we'll be able to tell you how these 12 outcomes in 49 days will
Right.
benefit your business. We are very we're very selective. We don't just want to sort of offer this program just because you may want it. You need to be obviously aligned to what needs to be done. You need to have a business that is actually
Yeah.
able to receive the right benefit as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And in other words, this is a very practical course. It's not just another one that you put it in your back pocket and you forget about. It's very practical in terms of you can implement and see results very quickly. Fantastic. So I think actually we can wrap up today. Thank you very much, Matteo. It was a fantastic session today. And remember that AI amplify what you have there. It's not. It's not a magic bullet.
Absolutely not. And if there's something I want you to take away from today is this:
Yeah.
growth is not automatically value.
Right.
If growth creates dilution without strategy, capital stack confusion, or a funding gap, it can make the business bigger and weaker at the same time. The
Yeah.
companies that win are not the ones that grow the fastest. They are the ones that grow with structure.
Excellent. Right. I think it's the best message to leave the conversation today. Wonderful. Thank you, Matteo, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.